He drove home one night, the city lights a blur, the penthouse, once a symbol of his comfortable, if empty, life, now felt like a mirror reflecting his deepest regrets. He thought of Evelyn, in her quiet study, probably poring over reports, her mind alight with complex strategies. He thought of her unwavering integrity, her sharp wit, her profound calm under pressure. These were the qualities that truly defined Evelyn Hayes, qualities he had systematically overlooked, taken for granted, and dismissed in favor of a romanticized memory. He saw Evelyn in her element, a general on the battlefield, her mind moving with strategic brilliance, uncovering weaknesses, identifying threats, and issuing directives with unwavering resolve. This was the Evelyn he had admired from afar, the Evelyn he had married for her intellect, but whose true depth he had failed to appreciate. He felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a crushing wave of regret. How could he have been so blind? Julian Thorne, scion of Thorne, enterprises and a celebrated architect in his own right, was a man of imposing stature and undeniable charm, qualities that had, ironically, drawn Evelyn to him years ago. Their union was, on the surface, a testament to success. Two brilliant minds, a shared address in one of the city's most exclusive districts, and a life of unparalleled comfort. But beneath the polished veneer, a hollow echoed, a space where genuine connection should have thrived but had long since withered, replaced by routine and mutual, unspoken expectations. Their conversations were often logistical, their shared moments punctuated by the polite distance of acquaintances rather than the intimacy of spouses. When the meeting concluded, Julian stepped out from his hiding place. Evelyn looked up, her expression briefly registering surprise before settling into her usual calm composure. Julian. An unexpected visit. Evelyn considered herself pragmatic. Love, as depicted in romance novels or whispered about by starry-eyed friends, had always seemed a fleeting, unreliable concept. She valued stability, intellect, and a shared pursuit of excellence. Julian, in his initial earnestness and intellectual curiosity, had seemed to embody those traits. Their courtship had been a dance of minds, a mutual admiration for strategic thinking and ambition. The emotional depth, or lack thereof, had been a secondary concern, easily overlooked in the intoxicating haze of shared professional triumphs and societal approval. She had built her life, her career, her very identity, on logic and foresight. Yet, even the most meticulously constructed edifice could not withstand the subtle erosion of an unseen flaw. I was concerned about the Zenith project, he admitted, his voice softer than he intended. I've been reviewing the reports. There seem to be more than just irregularities. Julian entered the dining room, his expensive suit impeccable, a faint scent of his signature cologne preceding him. He glanced at Evelyn, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before it was masked by his usual cordiality. Good morning. Evelyn, you're up early. Evelyn's dark eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher, perhaps a hint of weariness, but also a profound, unwavering determination. You are correct, she said, her voice low. It's more than irregularities. It's a deliberate campaign of sabotage, and I believe I know who is behind it. As always, Julian, she replied, her voice calm, devoid of inflection. She had learned long ago that emotional responses yielded little but frustration in their dynamic. The market doesn't wait for late risers. Julian felt a jolt. Sabotage? Who would dare? He nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible sigh escaping him. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the clink of porcelain against ceramic the loudest sound in the room. Any major developments with the Zenith project? He asked, shifting seamlessly into professional discourse. Someone with access, with motive, and with a profound inability to recognize true competence, Evelyn replied, her gaze steady, implying a deeper understanding he was only beginning to grasp. I've been compiling the evidence. It's extensive. Evelyn appreciated his directness. It was one of the few avenues where they truly connected. Minor adjustments to the financial model, nothing critical. We're on track for a Q3 launch, provided the regulatory hurdles are cleared by next month. His corporate instincts, honed by years of navigating treacherous boardrooms, kicked in. Evidence. What kind of evidence? Julian listened, his gaze fixed on the steaming coffee. He valued Evelyn's acumen, her ability to dissect complex problems and deliver concise, actionable solutions. There was no one he trusted more with the intricacies of corporate strategy, even if her genius often felt like an abstract concept, separate from the woman he lived with. For years, he had admired her from a distance within their shared home. A brilliant colleague first, a wife second. The comfort of their arrangement had been deceptive, insulating him from the nagging realization that something fundamental was missing. He had rationalized it as the natural progression of a mature relationship, a calm harbor free from the turbulent seas of passionate romance. Evelyn hesitated, then made a decision. There was no one in Thorne Enterprises with her level of strategic foresight, no one whose loyalty she could trust more implicitly than the man who, despite their personal differences, shared a fundamental stake in the company's well-being. And perhaps a part of her, a tiny, buried part, yearned for the intellectual collaboration they once shared, even if their personal relationship was fractured beyond repair. But lately, the harbor had felt less like calm and more like stagnation. A vague unease had begun to creep in, a sense of something unfinished, unresolved. It often manifested as a flicker of a past face, a ghost in the periphery of his memory. Serena, with her vibrant laughter and boundless energy, the girl who had once consumed his every thought, before the demands of his family's legacy and the practicalities of adult life had pulled them apart. He had convinced himself that the memory had faded, a pleasant echo rather than a living presence. He was wrong. "Come to my office tonight," she said, her tone professional, devoid of any personal invitation. "I'll show you." The day progressed, indistinguishable from countless others. Evelyn immersed herself in work, her office a sanctuary of logic and order. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument, dissected data, forecasted trends, and crafted strategies that left even seasoned executives nodding in admiration. Her subordinates, a small, fiercely loyal team, understood that beneath her quiet exterior lay a steel resolve and an analytical prowess that few could rival. They respected her not just for her intelligence, but for her unwavering integrity, a rare commodity in their competitive landscape. She led by example, working tirelessly, always prioritizing fairness and strategic long-term vision over short-term gains. Julian arrived at her office that evening, the air thick with the unspoken tension of their fractured relationship. Evelyn was already there, the incriminating documents spread across her large conference table. She spoke with a calm, methodical precision, laying out Marcus's convoluted scheme, the manipulated supply chains, the falsified quality reports, the offshore accounts, the secret communications with the rival firm. She explained how Marcus had leveraged the chaos of their impending divorce, viewing it as a window of opportunity to undermine her and seize control. Julian, meanwhile, wrestled with blueprints for a new civic center, his architectural vision grand and ambitious. Yet his thoughts kept straying. The stark quiet of his home, the polite distance with Evelyn, the faint, almost imperceptible feeling of absence. He tried to dismiss it, to bury it under layers of professional responsibility and social engagements. But the feeling persisted, a dull ache that he couldn't quite pinpoint. Julian listened, stunned. His mind, usually sharp and quick to grasp complex financial maneuvers, struggled to keep pace with the sheer scale and intricacy of Marcus's corruption. Evelyn, however, articulated it all with effortless clarity, dissecting the layers of deception with surgical precision. She highlighted the critical points, the irrefutable links, the damning signatures. That evening, a charity gala, a regular fixture in their social calendar, drew them into the city's elite circuit. Evelyn, elegant in a deep emerald gown that accentuated her graceful height and sharp features, moved through the crowd with an air of quiet self-possession. She was not overtly gregarious, but her insightful remarks and measured responses commanded attention, drawing small, earnest groups around her. Julian, accustomed to being the center of attention, found himself observing her from a slight distance, a faint sense of unfamiliarity blooming within him. He saw the respect in the eyes of others when they spoke to her, the genuine engagement in her conversations. And a fleeting thought crossed his mind: how much did he truly know this woman, his wife of 5 years? He used shell corporations in the Cayman Islands to funnel the funds, Evelyn explained, pointing to a flowchart she had meticulously prepared. The data leaks were coordinated with their product launch. It's a classic case of corporate espionage, executed by an insider. He was caught in a conversation with a prominent developer, the air thick with the murmur of polite laughter and clinking glasses. His gaze drifted across the ballroom, scanning faces, when his eyes landed on a woman with a cascade of fiery red hair, her back to him, laughing at something a companion said. The silhouette, the curve of her neck, the way her shoulders shook with mirth. It was eerily familiar. For a split second, his breath hitched. Serena. His mind, clouded by a potent mix of champagne and unresolved longing, conjured her image with startling clarity. The memories, long dormant, surged forth with an unexpected ferocity. First kisses under starlit skies, whispered promises of forever, the naive certainty of young love. He felt a dizzying pull, a visceral yearning for a past that had been irrevocably lost. Julian felt a cold fury rising within him, not just for the betrayal, but for his own blindness. Marcus, his own cousin, had been systematically dismantling the company from within, while he had been distracted by his own emotional turmoil, by the ghost of a past love. And Evelyn, his wife, the woman he was losing, had been the one to quietly, relentlessly expose the rot. He moved, almost without conscious thought, weaving through the throng, his eyes fixed on the red-haired figure. As he approached, the woman turned slightly, revealing a face that was not Serena's, but remarkably similar in its general contours and vivacious expression. A jolt of disappointment, quickly followed by a wave of embarrassment, washed over him. It was a stranger, a fleeting illusion born of a desperate, unacknowledged need. "This is unforgivable," Julian muttered, his voice hoarse with shock and anger. "And he targeted the Zenith project specifically? He was trying to frame you?" He faltered, then caught himself. His eyes scanned the room again, seeking a familiar anchor, and found Evelyn. She was standing near the edge of the ballroom, engaged in conversation with an elderly philanthropist, her posture impeccably poised, a faint, polite smile on her lips. In that moment, through the haze of alcohol and emotional turmoil, a distorted perception took hold. Her quiet grace, her familiar presence, her undeniable elegance, merged with the lingering image of Serena in his mind. The sharp intellect that defined Evelyn seemed to soften, replaced by a phantom echo of Serena's warmth. The years of polite distance, of emotional restraint, dissolved under the weight of his own desperate, misguided desire. Evelyn nodded. He saw the divorce as an opportunity to weaken both of us, to cast doubt on my competence. He underestimated me, as many do. It was his gravest error. He walked towards her, his steps more urgent than usual, a strange intensity in his gaze. Evelyn, sensing his approach, turned her head. Her dark eyes, usually so clear and perceptive, narrowed slightly at the unfamiliar urgency in his expression. Before she could voice a question, before her analytical mind could process the sudden shift in his demeanor, he reached for her. The quiet confidence in her voice, the unyielding strength in her eyes, resonated deeply within Julian. He saw not just a brilliant strategist, but a woman of profound moral courage, fighting for justice within the treacherous world of corporate power. His respect for her, already significant, swelled into a potent wave of admiration that transcended professional courtesy. It was something deeper, something akin to awe. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, a gesture so uncharacteristic, so intimate, that Evelyn froze. His eyes, usually guarded, were wide, filled with a raw, unbidden emotion she couldn't decipher. And then, he lowered his head. "What do we do?" Julian asked, his voice now imbued with a newfound earnestness. Devoid of his usual commanding tone, he was no longer trying to control Evelyn. He was asking to collaborate, to follow her lead. The shift was subtle but profound. His lips met hers, soft at first, then deepening with an unexpected hunger. It was not the familiar, perfunctory kiss of duty that occasionally passed between them, but a desperate, searching embrace, laden with a yearning that felt foreign and unsettling. Evelyn's mind reeled. The scent of champagne on his breath, the warmth of his hand, the pressure of his mouth. It was all overwhelmingly real, yet utterly out of place. Her instincts, honed by years of navigating treacherous corporate waters, screamed anomaly. She felt no reciprocation. only a profound sense of disorientation, a chilling certainty that this kiss was not for her. Evelyn looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she considered the weight of his question, the implications of allowing him into her meticulously constructed plan. His presence, while potentially useful, also carried the baggage of their personal history. But she saw the genuine concern in his eyes, the dawning understanding, and a flicker of something she hadn't seen in him for a long time: true humility. As his lips moved against hers, a whisper, almost imperceptible, escaped him. "Serena, we expose him," Evelyn stated, her voice calm. "But we do it surgically. We cannot allow this to become a messy public spectacle that damages Thorne Enterprises unnecessarily. We isolate the cancer and remove it cleanly." She then began to outline her strategic counterattack, a plan as intricate and precise as Marcus's own scheme, but designed for justice, not personal gain. The single word, breathed against her mouth, struck Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. It was not anger that coursed through her, nor heartbreak in the conventional sense. It was a cold, precise validation of a truth she had always suspected, but never fully acknowledged she was, and perhaps always had been. A stand-in. A convenient, intelligent, and socially acceptable replacement for a phantom of the past. The illusion of their marriage, thin as it was, shattered completely in that instant. She spoke of the timing, the sequence of revelations, the legal and public relations implications. She had considered every angle, anticipated every countermove Marcus might attempt. Julian listened, captivated. His own mind racing to keep up with her strategic genius, he offered suggestions, minor adjustments. And Evelyn listened, considering each one with professional detachment. It was like their early days, when their minds had melded, solving complex problems with a shared intellectual passion. Julian pulled back, his eyes clearing, the haze of alcohol and delusion lifting abruptly. He saw Evelyn's face, pale and unreadable, her dark eyes now sharp, piercing him with a clarity that bordered on clinical. The shock of recognition, the sudden, brutal realization of what he had done, what he had said, crashed over him. His hand fell from her face as if burned. The difference now was the emotional undercurrent. Julian felt a desperate need to support her, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to see her succeed, to see justice served, and perhaps to prove to her that he was capable of being the partner she truly deserved. His previous attempts to win her back had been self-serving. This was different. This was about Evelyn, about her principles, about her fight. He wanted to stand by her side, not just as a husband trying to save a marriage, but as an ally, a defender. "Evelyn," he stammered, his voice hoarse, a flush creeping up his neck. The blood drained from his face as the gravity of his mistake settled. I didn't mean..." He found himself actively taking on tasks she assigned, using his authority within Thorne Enterprises to quietly gather additional corroborating evidence, to discreetly verify her findings without alerting Marcus. He observed Evelyn's tireless dedication, her unwavering focus despite the personal turmoil she was navigating. He saw the subtle lines of fatigue around her eyes, the quiet strength that sustained her, and a profound sense of protectiveness, entirely new and startling, began to stir within him. Evelyn, however, offered no reaction beyond her composed stillness. The noise of the gala, the distant music, the chatter, all seemed to fade into a dull hum around them. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, devoid of accusation, yet filled with an undeniable, quiet resolve that chilled Julian to the bone. In that moment, she was not a wounded wife, but a strategist who had just identified a critical flaw in her most significant life investment. The facade had cracked, revealing an untenable truth. The more he worked with her, the more he witnessed her unparalleled competence and ethical steadfastness. The more intensely he felt the ache of losing her. He realized that Evelyn was not just the sum of her impressive professional achievements. She was a woman of deep integrity, profound resilience, and quiet grace. He had been so fixated on a phantom of the past that he had failed to truly see the vibrant, exceptional woman standing right in front of him. The Serena whisper, once a source of shame, now felt like a cruel irony, a symbol of his colossal oversight. She took a slow, deliberate breath, her expression remaining perfectly serene. The chaos swirling in Julian's mind contrasted sharply with her outward calm. This was not the scene of dramatic confrontation he might have expected, or even deserved. Evelyn was not one for histrionics. Her decisions were calculated, her actions precise. Julian Thorne was falling in love with his wife. Not the wife he thought he knew. Not the wife who fit neatly into his carefully constructed life, but the real Evelyn Hayes, the brilliant strategist, the moral compass, the quiet warrior he had systematically overlooked. His desire to save their marriage was no longer about public image or habit. It was about a desperate, aching longing for her, for the chance to truly know and cherish the woman he had so carelessly dismissed. The web of deception woven by Marcus was indeed unraveling. But in doing so, it was also unraveling Julian's own long-held illusions, revealing a deeper truth about his heart. "Julian," she said, her voice low, almost a murmur, yet cutting through the residual fog in his mind with surgical precision. There was no tremor, no anger, just a quiet finality that resonated deeply within him. "I want a divorce." The air in the Grand Thorne Enterprises boardroom crackled with an almost palpable tension. It was the annual shareholders' meeting, typically a staid affair of quarterly reports and predictable projections. Today, however, felt different. A palpable undercurrent of unease rippled through the gathered executives and major investors. Whispers of irregularities in the Zenith project had begun to circulate, carefully fueled by Marcus Thorne's insidious campaign of misinformation. Marcus himself sat at the imposing oval table, radiating an oily confidence, occasionally shooting discreet glances at Evelyn Hayes, a smug smirk playing on his lips. He believed his web of deception was impenetrable, his victory assured. The words hung in the air, a death knell to a marriage that had, for too long, existed on borrowed time and unspoken assumptions. Julian stared at her, utterly stunned. He had expected tears, anger, perhaps a shouting match. He had been prepared for a fight, for an emotional outburst that he could perhaps pacify or deflect. But this calm, resolute declaration, delivered with the quiet dignity of a woman making a logical decision, rendered him utterly speechless. Her eyes, cool and unwavering, held no trace of pain, only the chilling certainty of a path newly chosen. It was then that Julian knew, with a certainty that pierced through his own confusion, that Evelyn Hayes, his wife, had reached a point of no return. Evelyn sat opposite him, her posture impeccably straight, her expression serene. She was dressed in a charcoal gray power suit that seemed to absorb the light, making her appear even more formidable. Her hands rested calmly on the polished table, betraying no hint of the meticulous plan unfolding in her mind. She observed Marcus with a quiet intensity, noting his subtle fidgets, the slight tension in his shoulders, the tells of a predator about to spring, oblivious that he was walking into his own trap. Her loyal assistant, Clara, was positioned discreetly by the projector, ready to execute Evelyn's precise instructions. The world outside the Thorne penthouse was a tapestry of hushed dawn and the distant hum of a city stirring. Inside, the silence that followed Evelyn's pronouncement was monumental, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on Julian. He stood frozen, his hand still hovering in the space where Evelyn's face had been moments before. His mind, still grappling with the raw, brutal clarity of his accidental whisper, struggled to process her calm, definitive demand. Divorce. The word echoed, detached and clinical, a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom he had just navigated and, inadvertently, unleashed. Julian Thorne sat a few seats down from Evelyn, his gaze fixed on her. He had witnessed Evelyn's meticulous preparation over the past weeks, the tireless hours she had poured into compiling the evidence against Marcus. He had helped her in small ways, gathering corroborating data, discreetly verifying her findings, becoming her silent partner in this corporate war. During this time, his admiration for her had blossomed into something far deeper, a profound realization of the woman he had neglected for so long. The sight of her calm, collected demeanor amidst the brewing storm filled him with both a fierce protectiveness and a desperate hope. He desperately wanted to salvage not just Thorne Enterprises, but his relationship with her, a relationship he now understood he had only just begun to truly appreciate. "Evelyn," he managed, his voice barely a rasp. "What are you saying? You can't be serious." The meeting began with Julian, as CEO, delivering a routine overview of the company's performance. His voice was steady, but his mind raced, anticipating Evelyn's move. He kept his remarks brief, deferring to Evelyn for the detailed presentation on the Zenith project, as planned. Evelyn, however, merely turned from him, her movement fluid and deliberate, and walked towards the expansive living room, its panoramic view of the city now beginning to lighten with the rising sun. She settled into one of the pristine white sofas, her posture as composed as if they were discussing a quarterly earnings report. Julian followed, a knot tightening in his stomach. He expected anger, tears, a dramatic confrontation. Anything but this unnerving tranquility. Her serene expression was more damning than any accusation. Now, for the highly anticipated update on the Zenith project, Julian announced, his voice carrying a subtle emphasis. I hand it over to Evelyn Hayes, our head of strategic innovation, who has been instrumental in this crucial endeavor. I am perfectly serious, Julian, she stated, her voice clear, each syllable measured. Our marriage, as it stands, is a facade. It has been for a long time. Evelyn rose, her movements fluid and unhurried. As she approached the podium, a few skeptical murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. This was it. He had planted enough seeds of doubt. Evelyn's meticulously crafted presentation, he believed, would now fall apart under scrutiny, exposing the irregularities he had manufactured. Julian recoiled as if struck. A facade. What are you talking about? We have a good life, Evelyn. A stable life. We have everything anyone could want. His words tumbled out, defensive and bewildered, reflecting his profound inability to grasp the depth of her sentiment, or lack thereof. He believed in the tangible, the observable, their luxurious home, their successful careers, their respected positions in society. These, he thought, were the pillars of a strong union. Good morning, Evelyn began, her voice clear and resonant, filling the vast room. The Zenith project, as you know, represents a significant investment in our future. It is progressing as planned, and I'm pleased to report that we are on target for our Q3 launch. Evelyn's gaze, cool and unwavering, met his. We have a comfortable arrangement, Julian, a partnership of convenience, perhaps, but convenience is not intimacy. Stability is not connection. And certainly, shared ambitions are not a substitute for genuine affection. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. There is no emotional core to our relationship. We exist in parallel, two individuals occupying the same space, but never truly intersecting. She then launched into her presentation, a masterclass in corporate communication. She spoke with precision and clarity, detailing the technological breakthroughs, the market projections, and the immense potential of the project. Her command of the complex data was absolute, her arguments unassailable. She presented charts and graphs, each slide a testament to meticulous planning and execution. He scoffed, a desperate sound devoid of conviction. That's absurd. People grow. Relationships mature. Not every marriage needs grand declarations or constant emotional drama. We respect each other. We work well together. As she reached the section on project timeline and budget, Marcus leaned forward, ready to pounce. He had prepared a series of pointed questions, designed to expose the manufactured delays and cost overruns. He waited for her to present the fudged numbers, the figures that reflected his sabotage. Respect. Yes, Evelyn conceded, a flicker of something akin to weariness crossing her features before it was quickly veiled. Professional respect. But when your deepest affections, even in a moment of disorientation, are directed towards a ghost from your past, it merely confirms what I have long suspected. I am not, and have never been, enough for you. Julian. Not in the way a wife should be. Her words were delivered without bitterness, a simple statement of fact, which made them all the more devastating. But Evelyn did not present those numbers. Instead, a new slide appeared on the screen, projected by Clara with seamless efficiency. It was a forensic audit report, meticulously detailing unexpected delays and cost increases. The numbers were accurate, but the accompanying text provided a chilling explanation. The silence in the grand, meticulously designed penthouse apartment was often more deafening than any cacophony. Evelyn Hayes, seated at the sleek, obsidian-polished dining table, traced the rim of her untouched teacup. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cast long, clinical shadows across the minimalist decor, a stark reflection of the emotional landscape that had come to define her marriage to Julian Thorne. Evelyn was a woman of quiet strength and formidable intellect, her presence often underestimated by those who mistook her reserved demeanor for passivity. In the cutthroat world of corporate strategy, she moved with the precision of a master chess player, her mind always several moves ahead. Yet, in her own home, she felt like a guest, an observer in a life that was technically hers. As you can see, Evelyn continued, her voice unwavering, the project has experienced certain unexpected challenges. Challenges that, upon closer investigation, proved not to be the result of operational inefficiencies or unforeseen market fluctuations, but rather deliberate and systematic sabotage. Julian flinched, the memory of his whisper, "Serena," burned in his mind. He wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as a momentary lapse, a drunken mistake, but Evelyn's composure, her calm certainty, stripped away all his defenses. He saw the truth in her eyes, not anger, but a profound, almost clinical understanding. She hadn't just witnessed a gaffe, she had been given irrefutable proof of a deep-seated disconnect. A collective gasp swept through the room. Julian felt a surge of adrenaline, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. Marcus, his smug expression replaced by a look of dawning horror, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That was a mistake, Evelyn," he insisted, his voice pleading now. "The champagne, the late hour. I was confused. It meant nothing. We initiated an internal investigation." Evelyn proceeded, her gaze sweeping calmly across the faces in the room, pausing briefly on Marcus's now pale face. "And we uncovered an intricate web of deception and corporate espionage." "I know," she interrupted, her voice still quiet, yet firm. "I know that even when your guard was down, even when logic was clouded, it was another woman's name that came to your lips, not mine. That tells me everything I need to know about where I truly stand in your heart, or rather, where I don't." She rose, walking towards the window, her back to him, gazing out at the waking city. Her shoulders, usually held with such professional poise, seemed to carry an invisible weight. Clara clicked the next slide. On the screen, a complex flowchart appeared, meticulously detailing Marcus Thorne's scheme, the shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, the illicit transfer of funds, the coordinated data leaks to a rival conglomerate, the falsified quality reports, the manipulated supply chains. Each arrow, each box, was backed by irrefutable documentation, encrypted emails, bank statements, signed authorizations. The scale of his betrayal was laid bare, shocking in its audacity. "This isn't just about tonight, Julian," she continued, her voice gaining a subtle edge, though still remarkably calm. "It's about the years of polite distance, the carefully constructed walls, the unspoken acknowledgement that we were playing a role. I chose stability. I chose a partnership of equals. I accepted that grand passion might not be part of the equation, but I cannot accept being a placeholder. Not anymore." "The perpetrator," Evelyn announced, her voice rising slightly, "is an individual with significant access within Thorne Enterprises, who leveraged his position to benefit himself and a rival entity, while attempting to undermine the Zenith project and cast doubt on the integrity of his colleagues." Her gaze, now sharp and direct, landed squarely on Marcus. "That individual is Marcus Thorne." Julian felt a chilling dread creep over him. He had always taken Evelyn for granted. Her quiet confidence, her unwavering loyalty, her almost ethereal self-sufficiency. He had seen her as the perfect partner, the ideal wife who seamlessly blended into his life, supporting his ambitions without demanding emotional sustenance he wasn't prepared to give. He had been comfortable, lulled into a false sense of security by her lack of overt emotional demands. Now, for the first time, he saw the immense cost of that comfort. Chaos erupted. Murmurs turned into shouts, gasps into indignant exclamations. Board members looked at Marcus with undisguised fury. Julian felt a cold, righteous anger course through him. He saw Marcus's face drain of all color, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. The arrogant serpent had finally been caught in his own trap. "But why now?" he stammered, desperation entering his tone. "After all this time, we can fix this. We can talk. Go to therapy. Whatever you want, please, Evelyn." Don't throw everything away. His arguments were rooted in practicality, in the sheer inconvenience and societal disruption a divorce would cause. Rather than a genuine understanding of her emotional pain, he was arguing for the preservation of his comfortable existence, not for the revival of a lost love. This is outrageous, Marcus stammered, scrambling to his feet, his voice trembling with a desperate mix of denial and panic. These are baseless accusations. She's lying. This is a personal vendetta because of the divorce. He pointed a shaking finger at Evelyn. She's trying to ruin me. Evelyn turned, her eyes holding a faint, almost imperceptible sadness. Because tonight, it became undeniable. It validated a silent knowing that has lingered for years. And because I deserve more than a life where I am an afterthought, a convenient arrangement, I deserve to be seen, to be desired, for who I am, not as a blurry substitute for someone else. Her voice remained steady, a testament to her profound inner control. There was no anger, no accusations, just a calm, resolute statement of her needs, long unarticulated, now finally bursting forth. Evelyn remained utterly calm. All evidence has been meticulously verified by independent forensic auditors and legal experts. Every document, every transaction, every communication you see here is authentic and undeniable. Marcus. She paused, her voice gaining a steely edge. Your arrogance, Marcus, was your undoing. You believed you were untouchable. You underestimated the commitment to integrity within this company. And you profoundly underestimated me. Julian felt a strange combination of shock and something akin to a nascent fear. He had always been in control, orchestrating his life with precision. And now, Evelyn, his quiet, compliant wife, was dismantling it with such serene determination. He tried to grasp at straws. What about Thorn Enterprises? Your position. The Zenith Project, everything we've built together. He appealed to their shared professional world, the only realm where their connection had ever felt truly solid. She then played a short audio clip, a recording of Marcus's voice detailing sensitive project information to an executive at the rival firm, discussing the timing of product launches and the payouts. The voice was unmistakably his, clear and incriminating. The room fell silent, save for a few choked gasps. The evidence was irrefutable. Evelyn arched a brow, a hint of her strategic brilliance showing through. My work at Thorn Enterprises is my own, Julian. My contributions are well documented. A divorce does not erase my intellectual property or my professional standing. In fact, she added, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. It might even strengthen my position, unburdened by any perceived conflict of interest or association. Marcus Thorn crumpled back into his seat, his face ashen. He was exposed, his empire of lies shattered. Her words hit him with a fresh wave of alarm. Evelyn was not just emotionally detached, she was strategically prepared. This wasn't a rash decision born of fleeting anger, it was a calculated move, executed with the same precision she applied to her corporate endeavors. The realization that she had been planning this, or at least contemplating it with such clarity, for an unknown period, sent a chill down his spine. He had always admired her intellect, but now, faced with its application against him, he felt an unnerving sense of vulnerability. In the midst of this professional maelstrom, Julian Thorn felt a different, equally powerful storm brewing within him. Watching Evelyn dismantle Marcus's meticulously crafted deception, seeing her quiet strength and unwavering commitment to justice, ignited a profound realization. He had seen her intellectual prowess, her strategic genius, for years. He had respected it, but now, seeing her fight with such moral conviction, risking her own standing to expose corruption, awakened a deeper, more visceral emotion. He took a step towards her, his voice rough with something approaching panic. Evelyn, please, don't do this. We can work through this. I can change. I can make things right. The words felt hollow even to his own ears. He didn't truly know what right meant, or how to change. His pleas were born of fear of losing his status, of social scrutiny, and perhaps a dawning, terrifying fear of losing the quiet, competent presence that had anchored his life for so long, a presence he had never truly appreciated until this moment. He remembered the night of the gala, the shame of whispering Serena's name. He remembered his desperate, self-serving attempts to win Evelyn back, driven by fear of social embarrassment and loss of routine. He looked at Evelyn now, standing tall and resolute, a beacon of integrity in a room filled with shock and anger. He saw not the elegant, reserved woman he had married out of convenience, but a force of nature, a woman of unparalleled character and fierce independence. He saw her, truly saw her, for the very first time. Evelyn looked at him, her dark eyes holding a world of unspoken disappointment. Change takes time, Julian, and it requires a fundamental shift in perception and priorities. I cannot and will not wait for you to discover feelings you may never possess, or to reevaluate a person you have consistently failed to see. Her voice was soft, but the underlying steel was unmistakable. The paperwork will be filed this week. Consider this a notice. All the shallow attractions of Serena, all the lingering ghosts of his past, evaporated in that moment. They were meaningless, pale imitations compared to the vibrant reality of Evelyn. He loved her. Not the idea of her, not the role she played, but her. The brilliant, courageous, fiercely principled woman standing before him, fighting a battle for justice with the same quiet determination she applied to everything. With that, she turned and walked away, not in a huff, but with the quiet dignity of a queen exiting a court, leaving Julian alone in the vast, silent living room, the city slowly awakening outside. He stood there for a long time, the words, "I want a divorce," echoing in the stillness, each syllable a hammer blow against the carefully constructed edifice of his life. The boardroom devolved into a cacophony of outraged demands for Marcus's immediate dismissal, for legal action, for public statements. Julian, though outwardly composed, felt an overwhelming urge to speak, not about the corporate scandal, but about Evelyn. The following days were a blur of bewildered phone calls and desperate attempts from Julian. He tried to reach Evelyn, sending texts that went unanswered, calling her office only to be politely informed she was in meetings. When she finally responded, it was through her lawyer, a calm, professional directive to communicate solely through legal channels. This was Evelyn's style, clean, efficient, and ruthlessly effective. It was devastating for Julian, who was accustomed to resolving conflicts with his charm, or failing that, his authority. Neither had any sway over Evelyn now. He stood up, drawing all eyes. Marcus Thorne will be removed from all positions immediately, and we will pursue the full extent of legal action against him and anyone involved in this criminal conspiracy, Julian announced, his voice firm, projecting authority and unwavering resolve. Thorne Enterprises has zero tolerance for corruption, and I want to make it absolutely clear that the success of the Zenith Project and the unmasking of this treachery is due entirely to the unparalleled strategic brilliance and unwavering integrity of Evelyn Hayes. He initiated a series of grand gestures, almost comical in their desperation. A massive bouquet of rare white orchids arrived at her office, only to be redirected to a charity. An expensive piece of jewelry was delivered to the penthouse, which Evelyn instructed her assistant to return. He tried to arrange a private dinner, a talk, but was met with polite but firm refusals. Each attempt was met with Evelyn's cool, unyielding resolve, a fortress of logic and self-respect that he could not penetrate. He turned to Evelyn, his eyes burning with an intensity she had never seen before. The chaos in the room seemed to fade into a distant hum. His gaze was raw, vulnerable, stripped of all pretense. His friends, alerted by whispers in their social circles, offered bewildered advice. What happened? You two seemed so perfect. He couldn't explain it. How could he articulate that he had kissed his wife while thinking of another woman? That his wife had then calmly demanded a divorce? And that he was now scrambling to understand why this was happening? The shame burned, a constant, dull ache beneath his increasingly frantic efforts. "Evelyn," he began, his voice dropping, tinged with a desperate plea that was audible only to her, and perhaps to those closest to them. "I was blind. I was foolish. I chased a ghost and ignored the most extraordinary woman standing right beside me. I spent years taking you for granted, failing to see your true worth, your incredible depth. I was wrong. So terribly wrong." Julian found himself wandering aimlessly through their penthouse, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb of his own making. He looked at Evelyn's study, meticulously organized, filled with books on economics, philosophy, and global strategy. He had rarely stepped inside, assuming it was simply her professional domain. Now, he wondered what other parts of her life, and indeed, her very being, he had overlooked. He started to recall fragments: her quiet laughter at a clever quip, her focused intensity during a business discussion, the way she would sometimes hum a soft, unfamiliar tune while reading. These were small details, easily dismissed, but now, in their absence, they began to accumulate, forming a mosaic of a woman he realized he barely knew. His voice cracked, thick with a desperate, unbidden emotion. The kiss, that night, it was a culmination of my own misplaced longing, my own profound blindness. It was a mistake, a brutal, unforgivable mistake. But it was also the moment I began to wake up, to see you, truly see you. Evelyn. The idea of divorce, once a distant, abstract concept, now loomed large, threatening to dismantle not just his marriage, but his public image, his carefully curated life. The Thorne name was synonymous with stability, success, and impeccable lineage. A divorce, especially one initiated by his seemingly placid wife, would be a scandal, a stain on his family's reputation. He felt the weight of societal expectations pressing down on him, the unspoken demands of his family and peers. He had to fix this. He had to win Evelyn back. He took a step towards her, his voice gaining urgency, desperation pouring out of him, raw and unfiltered. I love you, Evelyn. I realize it now, with a clarity that devastates me because I know I might have lost you. I love your mind, your strength, your integrity, your quiet grace. Please, he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. Don't leave me. Don't divorce me. Give me a chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve, the partner you truly need. But as he plotted his next move, he found himself grappling with a disquieting truth. His frantic efforts weren't fueled by a passionate longing for Evelyn herself. Not yet. They were driven by a desperate need to restore order, to avoid embarrassment, to reclaim what he perceived as his rightful place. He was trying to prevent a consequence, not to reconnect with a person. The emotional awakening was slow, painful, and far from complete. He still saw Evelyn through the lens of what she represented: stability, intelligence, a perfect partner on paper. The true her, the woman he had failed to see, remained stubbornly out of reach, guarded by the quiet dignity of her demand for freedom. The room, still buzzing with the aftermath of Marcus's exposure, seemed to momentarily quiet as Julian's raw, emotional confession cut through the corporate jargon and legal demands. Evelyn, usually so stoic, felt a tremor run through her. His words, so unexpected, so utterly vulnerable, struck a chord deep within her. It wasn't the smooth, polished Julian she knew, but a man stripped bare, confessing his deepest regrets. His attempts became more calculated, less emotional, mimicking Evelyn's own approach. He began to engage his own lawyers, not to fight the divorce, but to delay it, to gain time. He initiated discreet inquiries into Evelyn's professional ambitions, trying to understand her world, to find an angle, a leverage point. He started showing up at events he knew she would attend, observing her from afar, trying to decipher the unreadable expression on her face. He was treating their marriage like a complex negotiation, a business deal gone awry, because that was the only language he truly understood. Just as the emotional intensity peaked, a figure silently rose from the back of the room. It was Serena. She'd been invited by Marcus, a final, misguided attempt on his part to destabilize Julian and Evelyn, believing her presence would be a source of discomfort. She had witnessed Evelyn's methodical takedown of Marcus, and now, Julian's raw, public declaration of love for his wife. Her face, usually so animated, was now pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Yet, a tiny, almost imperceptible seed of genuine curiosity began to sprout amidst his strategic machinations. He started noticing things about Evelyn he had never truly observed before: the way her eyes would sparkle when she discussed a particularly challenging economic theory, the subtle shift in her posture when she was deeply engrossed in a thought, the quiet strength that emanated from her even in casual settings. These were not the traits of Serena, the effervescent, impulsive girl of his youth. These were the hallmarks of Evelyn, a woman of depth, resilience, and formidable intellect, a woman he was losing, and whose true worth he was only now beginning to dimly perceive. The game had changed, and Julian Thorne, the master architect, found himself in a labyrinth of his own making, desperately searching for a way out, and for the first time in a long time, truly lost. She saw the raw emotion on Julian's face, the desperate sincerity in his eyes as he looked at Evelyn. It was a love she had never truly inspired, a depth of feeling that transcended the youthful infatuation they had once shared. She understood, in that moment, that she was indeed a ghost, a faded memory, and Evelyn was the living, breathing reality Julian truly desired. There was no place for her here, no role to play in this rekindled, turbulent love story. She turned, her head held high, and quietly slipped out of the boardroom. Her exit unnoticed by most, her presence now utterly irrelevant to the unfolding drama between Evelyn and Julian. The legal notices landed on Julian's desk with the cold finality of stone tablets, a tangible representation of Evelyn's unwavering resolve. The papers were impeccably prepared, outlining the terms with a precision that was distinctly Evelyn. There were no demands for excessive alimony, no dramatic claims of emotional distress, merely a clean, strategic division of assets and a definitive end to their union. It was, in its stark efficiency, far more unsettling than any emotional outburst could have been. Julian felt a profound sense of helplessness, a novel and deeply uncomfortable sensation for a man accustomed to wielding absolute control. Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on Julian, absorbing his every word, every nuance of his desperate plea. His confession, so public, so vulnerable, was a stark contrast to the polite distance that had defined their marriage. It wasn't just words, it was the naked truth of his heart, finally laid bare. The boardroom might have been in chaos around them, but in that moment, for Evelyn and Julian, the only thing that existed was the raw, brutal, and desperately hopeful truth of his words. The veil had finally been lifted, not just from Marcus's deception, but from Julian's own heart, revealing a depth of emotion Evelyn had long believed was absent. He tried, again, to reach her directly, but Evelyn's perimeter was unbreachable. His calls were routed to her lawyer. His attempts to intercept her at corporate events met with polite but firm deflections from her loyal assistant, Clara, a woman whose quiet efficiency mirrored Evelyn's own. Clara, a few years Evelyn's junior, possessed a fierce loyalty born from Evelyn's mentorship and unwavering fairness. She understood Evelyn's methodical approach to life, both personal and professional, and admired the steel beneath the calm exterior. Clara knew, implicitly, that Evelyn's decision was not made lightly. The chaos in the Thorne Enterprises boardroom gradually subsided, but the echoes of Julian's confession and Marcus Thorne's downfall lingered. Marcus, his face ashen and eyes vacant, was swiftly escorted out by security, the wrathful, despairing gazes of those who had once trusted him fixed upon him. The legal repercussions were swift and brutal. The evidence Evelyn had meticulously compiled was undeniable. Within days, Marcus faced multiple federal charges for fraud, industrial espionage, and money laundering. Thorne Enterprises, under Julian's direction, issued a strong public statement, reaffirming its commitment to ethics and highlighting Evelyn's pivotal role in unmasking the conspiracy. Justice in the corporate world was delivered transparently and decisively. Evelyn, meanwhile, channeled her immense mental energy into the one realm where she consistently found solace and validation: her work. The offices of Thorne Enterprises, a sprawling monolith of glass and steel in the heart of the financial district, became her sanctuary. She moved through its polished corridors with her usual quiet authority, her presence a magnet for those seeking clarity in complex situations. Her colleagues, ever observant, noted her heightened focus, the subtle intensification of her already formidable concentration. They attributed it to the sheer scale of the new venture she had undertaken, the Zenith Project, rather than the turmoil in her personal life. While the world of Thorne Enterprises reeled from the fallout, Julian's personal world narrowed entirely to Evelyn. His public confession in the boardroom had not been a tactic, but a genuine outpouring of emotions held captive for too long. Now, facing the quiet after the storm, he had to contend with the consequences of those words and the immense task of rebuilding the shattered bridge between himself and Evelyn. The Zenith Project was a beast of a challenge, even for Evelyn. It involved a massive technological acquisition in a nascent but rapidly expanding market, requiring intricate negotiations, intricate legal navigation, and a deep understanding of future market trends. It was precisely the kind of high-stakes, high-reward endeavor that Evelyn thrived on. It demanded every ounce of her strategic brilliance, pulling her mind away from the uncomfortable echoes of her failing marriage and Julian's desperate, belated attempts at reconciliation. Evelyn, after the meeting concluded, had displayed no overt emotional reaction to Julian's confession. She calmly gathered her documents, her eyes as still as an unruffled lake. She knew the words carried weight, but she also knew that words, however sincere, were only the beginning. Trust was built by action, and her trust in Julian had been shaken to its core. She spent long hours in her office, her desk adorned with neat stacks of reports and schematics, her computer screen alive with complex data visualizations. She worked with an almost meditative intensity, her analytical mind dissecting every clause, every projection, every potential risk. Her team, often working late into the night alongside her, witnessed her quiet leadership. She rarely raised her voice, but her insights were sharp, her directives clear, and her expectations high. Yet she fostered an environment of collaborative problem-solving, always encouraging input and valuing diverse perspectives. She was a leader who inspired fierce loyalty not through charisma, but through competence and consistent integrity. Julian followed Evelyn out of the boardroom, through the long corridors of Thorne Enterprises. He tried to speak to her, but Evelyn simply shook her head. "Not here. Julian," she said, her voice soft, but firm. "And not now." One evening, as the city lights began to twinkle outside her window, Evelyn meticulously reviewed a convoluted contract, her pen moving with precision as she annotated key sections. Clara, her assistant, knocked softly and entered, holding a steaming mug of her favorite herbal tea. He knew she was right. His confession had been too public, too dramatic. Rebuilding something meaningful required privacy, sincerity, and time. A great deal of time. "Still here, Evelyn?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "It's almost 10 days later." Julian arrived at the penthouse alone, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. Evelyn had agreed to see him, not as a wife, but as an individual. No lawyers, no assistants, just the two of them in the space that had once been their home. Evelyn looked up, her expression calm. "Just finishing this. There's a clause buried here that feels like a trap. We need to renegotiate it before the final signing." Her eyes, usually calm, held a steely glint, indicating she had discovered something significant. As he entered, the penthouse felt emptier than ever, reflecting the emptiness within himself. Evelyn was seated in the living room, facing the window, a closed book resting on her lap. She did not look up as he entered. Clara nodded, used to Evelyn's uncanny ability to spot hidden pitfalls. The other side's legal team is notoriously aggressive. They'll push back hard. Julian stopped a few feet from her, feeling awkward and uncertain, a sensation entirely alien to him. "Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet. "Let them," Evelyn replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "That's precisely why we must be ironclad. They underestimate us. Clara. They always do. It's their first mistake." She slowly turned, her dark eyes meeting his directly. There was no anger, no resentment, just an impenetrable calm. It was this very calm that made Julian feel most vulnerable. This observation was a recurring theme in Evelyn's career. Her calm demeanor, her quiet strength, and her lack of overt self-promotion often led opponents to underestimate her, especially in male-dominated corporate arenas. They saw the elegant, composed woman and failed to perceive the strategic titan beneath. This underestimation was, more often than not, their undoing. She thrived on it, using their preconceived notions as a strategic advantage, allowing them to reveal their weaknesses before she unveiled her full hand. "What do you want to say, Julian?" she asked, her voice even devoid of emotion. As Evelyn delved deeper into the Zenith project, she began to unravel layers of corporate maneuvering that extended beyond simple business competition. She detected faint irregularities, almost imperceptible ripples in the vast ocean of data, that suggested a deeper, more nefarious agenda. It was the kind of intricate puzzle her mind relished, requiring not just analytical prowess, but an almost intuitive sense of where the cracks in the facade might lie. This was more than just a challenging project. It was beginning to feel like a strategic war. He took a deep breath. I want to apologize, Evelyn, not just for what happened at the gala, though that was a terrible mistake, but for all the years before that, for not seeing you, for taking you for granted." He paused, the words coming out unbidden, painfully sincere. "I was too focused on a ghost from the past, on Serena, that I failed to see the extraordinary woman who was right in front of me. I was too comfortable in a life of convenience that I failed to recognize the profound emptiness I had created between us." Meanwhile, Julian found himself increasingly consumed by the unfolding drama of his personal life. Yet, paradoxically, his perception of Evelyn began to shift. His initial attempts to win her back had been driven by a mixture of public image concerns, habit, and a dawning fear of loss. But as he watched her from afar, through hushed conversations at galas, through the detailed reports that crossed his desk at Thorne Enterprises, through the increasingly impressed murmurs of his own executives, a new, more profound realization began to dawn. He saw her at a board meeting, presenting a revised financial model for the Zenith project. Her voice was clear, concise, her arguments unassailable. She fielded aggressive questions from seasoned board members with grace and precision, her intellect shining with undeniable brilliance. He watched as a grizzled veteran of the industry, known for his skepticism, finally nodded slowly in reluctant approval. Julian felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name, not just admiration, but a growing respect that transcended their personal entanglement. He had always acknowledged her intelligence, but seeing it in full, unbridled flow, unleashed from the confines of their stilted marriage, was a revelation. He started discreetly asking questions about the Zenith project, seeking out those involved, listening intently to their assessments of Evelyn's performance. The feedback was uniformly glowing. "She sees things no one else does," one junior executive confided, eyes wide with awe. "She's like a corporate oracle." Another, a seasoned engineer, remarked, "Her understanding of the technical details, combined with her strategic vision, is simply unparalleled. She's a force of nature." Serena came back, Julian continued, "and initially, I saw her as a comfort, an escape. I deluded myself into believing she was the true love I had lost. But the more time I spent with her, the more I compared her to you. The more I realized the profound difference. Her vivacity felt shallow. Her simplicity felt lacking in depth. She represented a past I had romanticized, while you represent a future I had overlooked." These observations slowly, painfully, began to chip away at Julian's carefully constructed image of Evelyn as the perfect, predictable wife. He began to see her not just as the woman he was divorcing, but as Evelyn Hayes, the formidable strategist, the intellectual powerhouse. The initial panic of losing his comfortable life began to morph into something deeper, a recognition of the immense value of what he was actually losing. Not just a wife, but an intellectual equal, a strategic partner, a woman of profound substance he had tragically undervalued. He moved closer to Evelyn, kneeling before her, a gesture utterly uncharacteristic of his proud nature. That whisper, "Evelyn!" It was a terrible symbol of my blindness, but it was also the brutal wake-up call I needed. I started to see you when I thought I was losing you, and now, I see you more clearly than ever. I see your intellect, your strength, your integrity, your resilience. I see the woman who saved our company from destruction, a destruction I was too blind to recognize. His visits to the penthouse became less about trying to mend the marriage and more about observing the space Evelyn had created for herself. He noticed the subtle shift in the energy of her study, the fresh flowers she now kept on her desk, the faint scent of the tea Clara brought her, the small, framed photograph of her and her younger sister, radiating a warmth he hadn't seen directed at him. He saw the signs of a woman not just living, but thriving, building a life independent of him. And the realization struck him with unexpected force. Evelyn was not shrinking in the face of their divorce. She was expanding. His voice was quiet, trembling with a genuine plea. "I love you, Evelyn. I love you for who you are, not for the role you played. I was wrong to think our peace was an absence of feeling. I realize now it was your depth, your capacity to love quietly but profoundly. Please give me a chance to prove that I can be worthy of you. Please give me a chance to rebuild this, brick by brick, on a foundation of truth and genuine affection." The legal proceedings moved forward with relentless efficiency. Guided by Evelyn's firm hand, Julian's attempts to delay were met with counter motions that systematically dismantled his arguments. His lawyers, initially confident, began to express a grudging respect for Evelyn's legal team, marveling at their precision and their anticipation of every possible move. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that Evelyn was treating their divorce as just another complex negotiation, and she was, as always, several steps ahead. Evelyn looked down at him, her eyes holding a world of emotions. She saw the genuine remorse in his gaze, the true shift in his posture. She knew this was not a performance. This was Julian, stripped bare, finally confronting his own shortcomings. But she also remembered the pain of being a placeholder, the feeling of being taken for granted and unseen. One afternoon, Julian found himself alone in his office, staring at a printout of the latest Zenith project status report. Evelyn's name was prominently featured, credited with a critical breakthrough that had saved Thorne Enterprises millions. He felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a wave of regret. How had he been so blind? How had he failed to see the extraordinary woman who had been living beside him? "Julian," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "Your apology means something. Your confession in the boardroom did too. But trust is not something that can be restored with mere words, or even with a single moment of truth." He recalled the night of the gala, the brief, disorienting moment when he had confused her with Serena. The memory, once laden with a confusing mix of nostalgia and shame, now felt different. He had projected an idealized, superficial image onto Evelyn, an image that had nothing to do with her actual being. He had been so consumed by a phantom of the past, so comfortable in his preconceived notions, that he had utterly failed to see the vibrant, brilliant reality standing right in front of him. The kiss, meant for a ghost, had instead ignited a painful, but necessary, awakening. She stood, and Julian rose with her. "It took you a long time to see me, and you underestimated the scars your blindness left. I learned to live without your recognition. I built a life where my worth was defined by my own actions, not by your validation." The shock and desperation that had initially driven him began to evolve into a more nuanced understanding. He realized his pursuit of Evelyn, his desire to stop the divorce, was no longer just about public perception or habit. It was becoming something more authentic, driven by a dawning appreciation for her as an individual. He still didn't fully comprehend the depth of his feelings, but the admiration was undeniable, the curiosity insatiable, and the sense of loss profound. He was starting to fall in love with the woman he was divorcing, a woman he was only just beginning to truly know. "I do not doubt the sincerity of your words now," she continued, her voice even, "but true change requires persistence. It requires consistent action. I cannot and will not return to a relationship where I am a substitute. I need to be certain that this change is permanent, not a panicked reaction to loss." He remembered her words, "I deserve to be seen, to be desired, for who I am, not as a blurry substitute for someone else." The truth of it resonated with agonizing clarity. He had not seen her, not truly. And now, as he finally began to open his eyes, she was slipping away. Julian nodded, the despair in his eyes tinged with a new understanding. He had hoped she would fall into his arms, but Evelyn was not that kind of woman. She was a strategist, and even her forgiveness would be a strategic process. The divorce proceedings were a crucible, forcing Julian to confront his own shallow perceptions and the consequences of his emotional neglect. He felt a deep, unfamiliar emptiness within him, a void where Evelyn's quiet presence used to be. The comfort he had once taken for granted had been replaced by a gnawing regret. He was no longer trying to prevent a social inconvenience. He was desperate to retrieve something far more valuable: the opportunity to truly know and cherish the remarkable woman he had dismissed for so long. The sands were shifting, and Julian Thorne was finally feeling the ground give way beneath his feet, forcing him to stand on something real for the very first time. "I will do anything," he said. "Tell me what. Set any conditions. I will prove it to you." The news of Julian Thorne's impending divorce spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. It was a scandal, a juicy morsel for the gossip columns, and a public relations nightmare for Thorne Enterprises. Julian, ever conscious of his family's impeccable image, felt the pressure mount from all sides. His mother, a formidable matriarch, called daily, her voice laced with thinly veiled disapproval and thinly veiled anxiety. His business associates, while offering polite condolences, couldn't quite mask their speculative glances. The carefully constructed edifice of his life was indeed crumbling. Brick by painstaking brick. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. If you truly want to mend things, Julian, then you must understand that it is not about you winning me back. It is about you becoming a man capable of being the partner I need. It is about you truly seeing me, acknowledging my worth, and supporting me as an equal, not a convenient appendage. It was amidst this swirl of societal scrutiny and personal turmoil that Serena finally resurfaced. Her name had been an echo, a faint whisper in Julian's mind for years, a memory he had meticulously filed away in the archives of his youth. Now, she appeared not as a specter, but in vibrant, undeniable flesh, drawn by the scent of distress, like a moth to a flickering, vulnerable flame. You must confront your past publicly, not by hiding it, but by fully acknowledging what happened and why. You must show me that you understand the depth of the hurt of being a placeholder. She took a deep breath. And you will need patience. Trust is built brick by brick, and many bricks were lost. Every action you take, every choice you make, will be a new brick. Serena Dubois had always been a creature of impulsive charm and captivating vivacity. In their youth, her laughter had been music, her energy infectious, her beauty a dazzling light that had captivated Julian completely. Their breakup, forced by Julian's family's demands for a more suitable match and his own youthful susceptibility to pressure, had left a raw wound that had, over time, scarred over, but never truly healed. Or so Julian had convinced himself. She stepped closer to him, her eyes delving deep into his. You said you love my mind, my strength? Then, Julian, show me that you truly respect those things. Do not try to control this narrative. Do not try to rush it. I will dictate the pace. I will dictate the terms. Her first contact was a carefully worded email, ostensibly a message of concern from an old friend who had heard through the grapevine about his troubles. Julian, feeling adrift and increasingly isolated, clutched at the familiar comfort she offered. He responded, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. He missed the ease of their old rapport, the light-hearted banter, the feeling of being truly seen. A stark contrast to the intellectual rigors of his conversations with Evelyn. Julian felt a sharp pang of pain as her words sank in. She had not rejected him, but she had not accepted him easily either. She had laid down a challenge worthy of a strategist like her. This was not a battle he could win with force or charm. It was a conquest that demanded sincerity, persistence, and a fundamental shift within himself. They met for coffee, a discreet rendezvous in a quiet, upscale cafe far from their usual haunts. Serena walked in, a burst of color and vibrant energy, her red hair catching the light, her eyes sparkling with a familiar mischief. Julian felt a strange pang of nostalgia, a yearning for the simpler times she represented. She was still beautiful, still effervescent, still possessed that innate ability to make him feel like the most interesting man in the room. He nodded, his face grim but with a new spark of hope. I understand, he said, his voice resolute. I will accept your terms, and I will not disappoint you. Julian, she exclaimed, her voice a soft purr, as she slid into the seat opposite him. It's been too long. I was so sorry to hear about everything. Are you all right? Her concern seemed genuine, laced with a familiar intimacy that felt comforting, even intoxicating, in his current state of vulnerability. Evelyn did not react to his vow. She simply turned and looked out the window, towards the city, where the lights were beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. Julian stood there for a long time, watching her back, the sense of loss still present, but now mingled with a new resilience. He had made mistakes. He had caused hurt. But Evelyn, in her steadfastness, had offered him a path to redemption, a path that required true growth, not a quick fix. He knew the fight ahead would be a difficult one, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a genuine purpose. He would have to rebuild that bridge, not with words, but with every action, every choice, every brick of sincerity. He found himself pouring out his frustrations, the confusion, the shock of Evelyn's resolute decision. He spoke of the suddenness of it all, carefully omitting the catalyst, the kiss, the whispered name. Serena listened, her head tilted, her gaze unwavering, offering sympathetic murmurs and gentle affirmations. She was the antithesis of Evelyn's calm logic. She was pure, unadulterated emotion, a warm embrace in a world that felt increasingly cold and analytical. Julian Thorne understood the terms Evelyn had laid out. There would be no quick fix, no easy path back to her side. Her unwavering demand for action over words, for consistent, genuine change, was both a daunting challenge and a necessary crucible. He had spent years in a fog of self-absorption, failing to see the woman of substance beside him. Now, with his eyes painfully opened, he had to prove, not just to Evelyn, but to himself, that he was capable of the profound transformation she implicitly demanded. "I just don't understand it," Julian confessed, running a hand through his hair. "Evelyn has always been so rational, so contained. This just seems so out of character." His first step was immediate and public. He issued a detailed press release from Thorne Enterprises, not just addressing the Marcus Thorne scandal, but unequivocally praising Evelyn Hayes for her indispensable role in uncovering the corruption. He highlighted her strategic genius, her unwavering integrity, and her tireless dedication, ensuring that her contribution was recognized not just internally, but across the industry. This wasn't merely damage control. It was a deliberate act of public recognition, a testament to her worth, fulfilling one of Evelyn's unspoken conditions. He watched for her reaction, but Evelyn remained outwardly unperturbed, though Clara, her assistant, noticed a faint, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement when the news broke. Serena reached across the table and briefly touched his hand, her touch light and comforting. Perhaps she was just waiting for her moment. "Julian, some people, they keep things bottled up until they can't anymore. Or maybe," she added, her eyes softening, "she just wasn't the right person for you." "Not truly." Next, Julian initiated a series of profound professional changes within Thorne Enterprises. He restructured key departments, dismantling the remnants of Marcus's influence and reinforcing ethical oversight. He actively sought out Evelyn's input on critical decisions, not as a formality, but with genuine eagerness, often deferring to her superior strategic insight even when his own instincts initially leaned in a different direction. In board meetings, he made it a point to highlight Evelyn's contributions, to ensure her voice was heard and respected by all. He was subtly, but firmly, shifting the power dynamics, acknowledging her as a true equal, if not his superior, in strategic matters. The subtle implication hung in the air, a tacit suggestion that she, Serena, might be the right person. Julian, desperate for solace, allowed himself to entertain the thought. He began to spend more time with Serena. Lunches stretched into long afternoons, coffees into early dinners. They revisited old haunts, laughed at shared memories, and talked for hours about their youth, the dreams they had held, the path their lives had taken. Serena made him feel light again, unburdened by the weight of his unraveling marriage and the relentless demands of his career. She understood him, he thought, in a way Evelyn never had. She saw the boy he once was, the romantic, the dreamer. Not just the corporate titan, their interactions remained formal, professional. Evelyn maintained a polite distance, her expressions carefully guarded. She observed him, her dark eyes analytical, searching for consistency, for the true depth of his commitment. Julian knew this was a long game, and he was prepared to play it for as long as it took. Initially, Julian found immense comfort in Serena's presence. She was an escape, a nostalgic balm for his bruised ego and fractured peace of mind. Her effervescence provided a stark contrast to Evelyn's quiet, analytical intensity. He saw Serena as a link to a simpler time, a promise of rediscovered joy. He started to believe that perhaps this was fate, that their paths were meant to intertwine again, and that Serena was the true love he had been missing all these years. He convinced himself that her return was a sign, a divine intervention to pull him from the depths of his marital despair. One evening, he approached her after a late strategy session. "Evelyn," he said, his voice hesitant, "the legal team is finalizing the divorce papers. Are you still certain about this?" He began to see her as the antidote to his problems, a way to mend the gaping wound in his life. Serena, with her boundless enthusiasm and affectionate nature, seemed to validate this perception. She clung to his words, admired his successes, and offered unwavering support. Qualities Julian, in his self-absorption, had failed to truly appreciate in Evelyn. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze steady. My position has not changed, Julian. Actions speak louder than words. However, as the initial euphoria of Serena's return began to wane, a subtle dissonance began to emerge. Julian found himself, almost unconsciously, comparing her to Evelyn. The comparisons were not deliberate, but rather a slow, insidious process, fueled by the stark contrast between the two women. He nodded, a sharp pang of disappointment mixed with resolve. Understood. Then I will not contest it. However, I am not giving up on us. I will continue to earn your trust, whether we are married or not. My apologies and my intentions are for Evelyn, the woman, not for my wife. Serena's effervescence, once so captivating, now occasionally felt a touch shallow. Her conversations, while engaging, often revolved around superficial topics, celebrity gossip, or nostalgic reminiscing. She rarely delved into the complexities of the world or the intricate challenges Julian faced in his professional life. When he spoke of his architectural projects, of Thorn Enterprises, of the strategic battles Evelyn was currently fighting, Serena would listen politely, but her eyes would glaze over, and her responses would be vague or quickly steer the conversation back to more personal, less demanding topics. She admired his success, but she didn't understand the effort, the intellect, or the strategic genius that lay beneath it. She adored the image, not the man. This honesty, devoid of manipulation, seemed to momentarily crack her composure. A fleeting expression crossed her face, something akin to surprise, quickly veiled. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He was no longer trying to force her hand. He was simply laying his cards on the table, accepting her terms, and committing to the arduous process of true reconciliation. Evelyn, on the other hand, inhabited a world of intellectual rigor and profound strategic thought. Her conversations, even about mundane topics, often revealed layers of insight and analytical depth. She could dissect a complex geopolitical issue, offer a nuanced perspective on market trends, or articulate the intricate mechanics of a groundbreaking technological innovation with effortless clarity. She challenged him, stimulated his mind, and pushed him to think beyond superficialities. Julian now recalled how Evelyn had not only understood the intricacies of his architectural visions, but had offered incisive feedback that genuinely improved his designs. Seeing flaws and opportunities he had missed, she appreciated his ambition, but she also understood the drive, the discipline, and the intellectual effort it entailed. She revered the substance, not just the veneer. Julian also sought counsel from an unexpected source, Evelyn's younger sister, Sophia. Sophia, a vibrant artist with a keen understanding of human nature, had always been fond of Julian but fiercely protective of Evelyn. He reached out to her, expressing his profound regret and his earnest desire to understand Evelyn better. Sophia, initially skeptical, saw the genuine remorse in his eyes and the sincerity in his voice. She agreed to offer him insights, not to meddle, but to help him truly comprehend the woman he was trying to reconnect with. He found himself increasingly craving intellectual engagement, the kind Evelyn effortlessly provided. He tried to introduce more substantive topics with Serena, but she would often brush them aside with a playful dismissal or a change of subject. Her world was one of immediate gratification and surface pleasures, a stark contrast to Evelyn's disciplined pursuit of excellence and profound understanding. Evelyn doesn't care about grand gestures, Julian, Sophia told him during a discreet coffee meeting. She cares about integrity, about consistency, about being seen for her mind, for her character, not for her appearance or her role. You took her for granted because she was always there, always competent. You need to show her, every single day, that you see her, really see her. One evening, Julian took Serena to a high-profile industry event, hoping her presence would signal a new beginning and perhaps mend some of the social ripples caused by his impending divorce. Serena, dazzling in a vibrant red dress, was her usual charming self, flitting from conversation to conversation, her laughter echoing through the opulent hall. Julian, however, found his gaze repeatedly drifting towards Evelyn, who was across the room, engaged in a quiet but intense discussion with a powerful tech mogul. Sophia's words resonated deeply. Julian began to apply this understanding in subtle, yet profound ways. He started noticing the small details: Evelyn's preferred blend of tea, the way she would absently trace patterns on her desk when deep in thought, the rare, almost shy smile she reserved for her loyal team. He began to comment on her insights in meetings, not just professionally, but with genuine appreciation for her unique perspective. He would send her relevant articles he found, sparking intellectual discussions, not just about work, but about broader philosophical or economic concepts. These were not attempts to win her over, but genuine expressions of his growing respect and fascination. Evelyn, clad in a sleek, understated black suit, radiated an aura of calm competence. She wasn't holding court, but people gravitated toward her, drawn by the quiet intelligence that seemed to emanate from her. He saw her listen intently, her head slightly tilted, her dark eyes absorbing every detail before she offered a concise, insightful response. She was not seeking attention, but commanding respect. Evelyn, though still cautious, began to acknowledge these subtle shifts. She found herself engaging with him in these intellectual exchanges, her guard slowly, imperceptibly lowering. She saw his genuine interest, his willingness to listen, his capacity for growth. He was not just trying to rebuild the marriage, he was rebuilding himself, becoming a more thoughtful, more observant, more empathetic individual. He compared the two women. Serena, bright and effervescent, felt like a brilliant, beautiful butterfly, flitting from flower to flower. Evelyn, quiet and commanding, was like a deep, still ocean, vast, mysterious, and full of hidden depths. Serena offered comfort and escapism, a return to a simpler past. Evelyn offered challenge and growth, a pathway to a more complex, fulfilling future. Their shared work on the Zenith project became a powerful catalyst. As they navigated the final, complex stages of the project, they found themselves in close collaboration. Julian, now fully invested and enlightened, actively supported Evelyn, leveraging his influence to clear bureaucratic hurdles, to secure critical resources, and to deflect external pressures. He stood by her, not as a superior, but as a devoted partner, an unwavering shield against anything that might impede her progress. The realization hit Julian with a growing, uncomfortable clarity. His initial longing for Serena had been a yearning for the past, a desire to recapture a youthful ideal that no longer fit the man he had become. He was no longer the naive boy who had fallen for Serena's charm. He was a man of significant responsibility, accustomed to intellectual rigor and strategic thinking. Serena, for all her allure, felt increasingly like a beautiful distraction, a charming relic of a bygone era. Her non-confrontational nature, once seen as easygoing, now felt like a lack of depth. Her emotional volatility, once passionate, now seemed immature. One particularly stressful week, a key supplier threatened to pull out, jeopardizing the entire project. Evelyn worked tirelessly, analyzing contingency plans, seeking alternatives. Julian, without being asked, spent an entire night making calls, leveraging old connections, and ultimately securing a replacement supplier that exceeded their original requirements. He presented the solution to Evelyn the next morning, not with a flourish, but with a quiet sense of accomplishment. He began to see the true extent of his misjudgment. He had loved Serena with the unthinking ardor of youth, a love fueled by infatuation and shared naivete. His marriage to Evelyn, while lacking outward passion, had been built on a foundation of respect for intellect, ambition, and shared professional values. He had mistaken stability for absence of emotion, and now, as he was losing that stability, he was finally realizing the profound emotional connection he had actually forged with Evelyn, not through grand gestures, but through years of shared intellectual pursuits, quiet understanding, and unwavering support. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes finally softening. "That was impressive, Julian," she said, a genuine note of surprise and appreciation in her voice. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." The contrast between Serena's charming superficiality and Evelyn's profound substance became increasingly stark. Serena's presence, initially a source of comfort, now began to feel jarring, almost trivializing the real challenges he faced. He found himself growing restless during their conversations, his mind yearning for the sharp repartee and insightful analysis that had been Evelyn's default. "I wanted to," Julian replied, his gaze earnest. Your vision for this project, for Thorn Enterprises, is too important. And you deserve to have a partner who fully supports that vision. Serena, too, began to notice the shift. Julian, once so eager for her company, now seemed distracted, his gaze often far away, his answers less enthusiastic. She sensed his mind was elsewhere, perhaps still preoccupied with the divorce, or worse, with Evelyn. Her attempts to recapture his full attention, through increased affection or playful banter, felt increasingly forced, like trying to revive a flame with damp kindling. The unspoken weight of his words hung in the air. He wasn't just talking about the project. He was talking about her life, her ambitions, her intrinsic worth. For the first time, Evelyn felt a genuine warmth toward him, a faint ember of hope stirring within her. It was a small crack in the carefully constructed wall she had built around her heart. Julian started to pull away. Subtly at first, then more definitively. His excuses for not meeting became more frequent, his responses more succinct. He needed space, he realized, not just from Serena, but from the idealized phantom of his past that she represented. He needed to confront the present, to fully comprehend the magnitude of his loss, and to understand the woman he was truly losing. Their conversations gradually shifted. From purely professional exchanges, they moved to cautious personal disclosures. Julian spoke openly about his past, about his lingering guilt over Serena, and the profound realization that his infatuation had been a shallow projection, a fantasy that had blinded him to true connection. He talked about his own upbringing, the pressures of the Thorn legacy, and how he had mistakenly equated success with happiness, overlooking the emotional depth required for a fulfilling life. Evelyn listened, her eyes never leaving his. She did not interrupt, did not react, simply allowing him to say everything he needed to. Evelyn listened, her empathy, though carefully guarded, palpable. She began to share small fragments of her own vulnerability, the quiet loneliness she had often felt within their marriage, the disappointment of realizing she was a substitute, the long, arduous journey of building her self-worth independent of external validation. She did not express anger or blame, but simply stated the facts of her emotional landscape, allowing him to understand the depth of the damage he had unwittingly inflicted. The realization was a painful one, a bitter pill to swallow. He had chased a ghost, and in doing so, had blindly ignored the vibrant, living reality of the extraordinary woman who had stood beside him. The comfort Serena offered was fleeting, a shallow attempt to fill a void that only genuine connection could truly satisfy. And Evelyn, in her quiet dignity, in her unwavering demand for authenticity, had exposed the truth of his emotional blindness. He had thought he was seeking solace, but he had merely been seeking an escape from the consequences of his own superficiality. The shadows of the past were fading, revealing not a romantic reunion, but the stark, undeniable silhouette of a profound mistake. It wasn't just the kiss, Julian, she said softly one evening, after a particularly candid conversation. It was the confirmation of a feeling I had carried for so long. The feeling of being unseen, of being valued for my utility, not for my essence. Julian Thorn found himself in a peculiar and increasingly uncomfortable limbo. The divorce proceedings, though moving at Evelyn's deliberate pace, created a constant hum of tension beneath the surface of his daily life. Serena's presence, once a comforting balm, now felt like a shallow distraction, her effervescence failing to fill the growing void that Evelyn's absence had carved. He saw Evelyn now with new eyes, not through the blurred lens of past infatuation, but with a dawning appreciation for her profound intellect and quiet strength. This burgeoning respect, however, was accompanied by a gnawing anxiety he was losing her, and he had no clear path to reclaim what he was only just beginning to truly value. Julian flinched, the words striking deep. "I understand that now, Evelyn, and I promise you, with every fiber of my being, that I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are seen, you are valued, you are desired, for your essence." The corporate landscape, a world Evelyn and Julian both navigated with expertise, rarely remained tranquil for long. Thorn Enterprises, a titan in its industry, was always a target. The Zenith Project, a venture Evelyn had meticulously spearheaded, was particularly vulnerable. It represented a bold leap into a new technological frontier, and its success would redefine the company's position in the global market. Its failure, however, would be catastrophic. He did not push for physical intimacy, for emotional declarations. He understood that trust, once broken, required patient, consistent nurturing. He respected her boundaries, giving her the space she needed. Always present, always supportive, but never demanding. He proved his commitment through his actions, his unwavering advocacy for her at work, his genuine interest in her intellectual pursuits, his consistent presence as a true partner. Unbeknownst to Julian, and at the time, even to Evelyn, a viper was lurking within the very ecosystem of their shared professional world. Marcus Thorne, Julian's ambitious and deeply resentful cousin, had been quietly building his own power base within the company for years. Marcus, a man whose ambition far outstripped his talent, had always felt overshadowed by Julian's effortless success and the Thorne family's unwavering favoritism towards him. He was arrogant, cunning, and viewed Evelyn, a woman who had risen through sheer merit rather than inherited privilege, with a potent mixture of disdain and envy. He saw her as an outsider, an interloper, and her impending divorce from Julian provided the perfect opportunity to strike. He began attending her lectures and speaking engagements, sitting in the audience, not as a show of support, but as a genuine admirer, taking notes, engaging in discussions afterward. He started anticipating her needs, not in a paternalistic way, but as an attentive partner. He brought her rare books on quantum physics, knowing her quiet fascination with the subject. He championed her initiatives, even those that were outside the direct scope of Thorne Enterprises, simply because they aligned with her passions. Marcus had consistently underestimated Evelyn. He viewed her quiet demeanor as weakness, her methodical approach as slowness. He dismissed her strategic brilliance as merely Julian's good fortune in having a competent subordinate, failing to grasp that Evelyn was, in fact, the driving force behind many of Thorne Enterprises' recent successes. He saw her as an obstacle, a woman whose intelligence inconveniently exposed his own mediocrity. The divorce, he reasoned, would weaken Julian, make him distracted, and offer a clear path to undermine Evelyn, thereby clearing his own ascent within the company. Friends and colleagues began to notice the subtle but profound shift in Julian. He was more grounded, more humble, more genuinely attentive. The arrogance that had once subtly defined him had softened, replaced by a quiet sincerity. He spoke of Evelyn with a profound respect and admiration that was impossible to fake. The whispers of their impending divorce, once a topic of gossip, now transformed into murmurs of wonder at Julian's remarkable change. His plan was insidious, a slow, methodical poisoning of the Zenith project from within. He began by subtly manipulating supply chains, delaying critical components, and introducing minor, seemingly innocuous errors into technical specifications. These were not direct sabotage, but rather a series of small, cumulative disruptions designed to derail the project's timeline and budget, creating an impression of incompetence on Evelyn's part. He cultivated a network of disgruntled mid-level managers and sycophantic subordinates, feeding them misinformation and subtly turning them against Evelyn's directives. He was a master of corporate whispers, planting seeds of doubt and distrust with casual remarks and feigned concern. Evelyn, observing all of this, slowly, cautiously, allowed herself to hope. She saw the genuine effort, the consistent action, the undeniable transformation. Julian was no longer the man who had kissed her while thinking of another. He was a new man, forged in the crucible of loss and self-discovery. The intellectual connection, which had always been strong, was now being slowly, tentatively, joined by an emotional one, nurtured by shared vulnerability and the painstaking rebuilding of trust. Evelyn, with her finely tuned strategic instincts, began to notice the anomalies. A delay here, an unexpected cost overrun there, a sudden bottleneck in a typically smooth process. Individually, each incident seemed minor, perhaps even attributable to normal business fluctuations. But Evelyn's mind was a pattern recognition engine. She saw the disjointed pieces, and the alarm bells, faint at first, began to chime. She still had her reservations. Her internal walls had been built over years of quiet self-preservation. But Julian's persistence was not overbearing. It was a steady, gentle pressure, like water eroding rock, slowly shaping a new landscape. She began to lean on him, allowing herself to accept his support, to trust his judgment, not just professionally, but personally. The fear of being a placeholder slowly began to recede, replaced by the dawning realization that she was, finally, truly seen. The divorce papers, still in progress, felt increasingly irrelevant, a ghost of a past decision, fading in the light of a new, tentative dawn. The path was long, but Evelyn, for the first time in a very long time, felt herself walking it, not alone, but with a partner who was finally walking beside her, truly seeing her. Her first move was not to confront, but to investigate. She instructed Clara, her ever-loyal assistant, to meticulously cross-reference every data point related to the Zenith project. She pulled up old emails, internal memos, and supply chain manifests. Poring over them late into the night, her quiet study became a war room. Her focus, absolute. She recognized the hallmarks of a deliberate campaign, a subtle yet pervasive attempt to sabotage the project. This was not mere inefficiency, this was malice. The Zenith project launched with spectacular success, a testament to Evelyn Hayes's unparalleled strategic vision and Julian Thorne's unwavering support. It was hailed as a groundbreaking achievement for Thorne Enterprises, catapulting the company into a new era of technological leadership. The public vindication of Evelyn and Julian's unequivocal public recognition of her efforts silenced any lingering whispers about the Marcus Thorne scandal, cementing her position as an indispensable force within the corporate world. But for Evelyn, the true victory was not professional. It was personal, measured in the subtle shifts in her relationship with Julian. Clara, observing Evelyn's intense focus, felt a surge of admiration. Most executives would have reacted with immediate anger, launching accusations and disrupting operations. But Evelyn, true to her nature, remained calm, her movements precise, her analytical mind already dissecting the problem like a complex mathematical equation. She trusted Evelyn's instincts implicitly, knowing that if Evelyn suspected foul play, it was almost certainly true. The divorce papers, once a stark symbol of her resolute decision, now lay dormant, unsigned. Evelyn had not withdrawn them, but neither had she pushed for their finalization. She observed Julian meticulously, clinically, for signs of regression, for any hint that his transformation was merely a temporary performance. Yet, day by day, his actions consistently proved the depth of his change. He was not just supportive, he was an advocate. He was not just attentive, he was truly seeing her. Julian, meanwhile, remained largely oblivious to the internal corporate machinations, distracted by his own personal struggles. He was still trying to navigate the choppy waters of his relationship with Serena, which was becoming increasingly strained, and the lingering regret over Evelyn. However, he did notice the unusual reports crossing his desk regarding the Zenith project. The minor delays, the budget increases, they were perplexing. Given Evelyn's reputation for flawless execution, he sent her a brief email, a polite inquiry, expressing concern for the project's timeline. Their conversations now flowed with an ease and depth they had never possessed during their marriage. They discussed not only corporate strategy and economic theories, but also art, philosophy, and the subtle nuances of human nature. Julian sought her opinions, valued her insights, and challenged her intellect in ways that stimulated and delighted her. He celebrated her triumphs with genuine pride and offered solace during her rare moments of doubt, not with platitudes, but with a profound understanding born of truly listening. Evelyn's reply was equally concise and professional. All irregularities are being investigated. The project remains on schedule. It was a subtle reassurance, but it also conveyed a silent warning she was aware, and she was in control. Julian, knowing Evelyn's precision, understood that the simple word irregularities implied something far more significant than mere operational hiccups. A flicker of concern for her, and for the project, ignited within him. One evening, after a particularly late meeting, Julian drove Evelyn home. The city lights blurred past the windows of his car, a familiar backdrop to a profoundly changed dynamic. He pulled up to the penthouse, but neither moved to exit immediately. The comfortable silence that settled between them was no longer empty. It was filled with a quiet understanding, a nascent intimacy. Marcus, emboldened by the perceived chaos surrounding Julian and Evelyn's divorce, escalated his efforts. He moved from subtle sabotage to more overt, though still deniable, actions. He misplaced critical documents, authorized incorrect shipments, and subtly encouraged a key contractor to delay their deliverables, all while maintaining an air of helpful, concerned oversight. He even approached Julian directly, feigning worry about Evelyn's distraction due to the divorce, subtly suggesting that she might be losing her edge. "Evelyn," Julian began, his voice soft, "the Zenith launch was flawless. It's a testament to your genius. I've never seen anyone navigate such a complex project with your level of precision and foresight." "Julian," Marcus had said, leaning back in his chair in Julian's office, a picture of false camaraderie. "I'm concerned about Evelyn. The Zenith project seems to be hitting some snags, and with all the personal issues, perhaps she's not as focused as she needs to be. Maybe someone else should take over, just until things settle." "It was a collaborative effort." "Julian," Evelyn replied, her voice calm, but a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. "Your support, particularly with the supplier issue, was critical. You moved mountains." Julian's eyes narrowed. He had always found Marcus's ambition a bit too overt, his concern a shade too convenient. "Evelyn is fully capable, Marcus. Her personal life does not interfere with her professional duties, and her track record on the Zenith project speaks for itself." His defense of Evelyn was instinctive, a reflex born of his newfound appreciation for her competence, a quiet protectiveness stirring within him. He saw through Marcus's thinly veiled attempt to undermine Evelyn, recognizing the familiar tactics of a weaker competitor. "I did it because I wanted to," he said, turning to face her, his eyes earnest in the dim light. "Because it was your vision, and it deserved to succeed. Because you deserve every triumph. Evelyn, every single one." Marcus feigned surprise. "Of course, Julian. Just looking out for the company. And for you. Of course. Wouldn't want any more complications." He gave a slight, insincere smile before leaving, his words laced with a subtle threat. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've thought a great deal about what you said, about earning your trust, brick by brick, about being the man who truly sees you. I hope my actions have begun to demonstrate that." Evelyn, armed with Clara's meticulous data and her own investigative prowess, began to piece together the puzzle. She observed patterns in the errors, noting that they always occurred at critical junctures, always involved specific personnel or suppliers, and always seemed to benefit a particular competitor indirectly. She saw the network of disgruntled employees Marcus had cultivated, the whispers he had sown. She recognized the classic tactics of an internal saboteur, a serpent in their midst. Evelyn met his gaze, her usual composure unruffled, yet her eyes held a depth of contemplation. "They have, Julian, your public acknowledgement, your restructuring of the company, your consistent support for my work, your willingness to listen and truly understand. These are not small things. They are profound." She kept her findings close, revealing them only to Clara and a handful of trusted, high-level technical experts who reported directly to her. There was no room for error, no space for premature accusations. She needed irrefutable proof, a smoking gun that would expose Marcus and his network completely. Her calm exterior remained unruffled, but beneath it, her strategic mind was working at warp speed, meticulously planning her counterattack. She understood that exposing Marcus prematurely would only allow him to cover his tracks and inflict further damage. She needed to let him dig his own grave, then pull the dirt in after him. A tremor of hope ran through Julian. Then, what now? "Evelyn, the divorce papers are still there. Is there a possibility? For us," his voice was a bare whisper, vulnerable and hopeful. The stress of the situation, though hidden from most, manifested in subtle ways. Evelyn worked longer hours, her meals often forgotten. She allowed herself only a few hours of sleep each night, her mind buzzing with calculations and permutations. Yet, she never faltered, never showed weakness. The challenge ignited a fire within her, a profound sense of purpose that transcended the personal turmoil of her divorce. This was not just about Thorn Enterprises. It was about integrity, about justice, about exposing the corrosive effects of unbridled arrogance and corruption. Evelyn looked out at the city, her thoughts drifting to the woman she had been, the woman she had become. The path had been arduous, fraught with the pain of unacknowledged truths and the quiet struggle for self-validation. She had emerged stronger, more self-aware, and fiercely independent. Julian's transformation was equally profound, born from a painful awakening and a genuine commitment to growth. He was no longer the man blinded by a ghost. He was the man who had fought to see her, to understand her, to cherish her. Her investigation led her down a labyrinthine path of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and carefully laundered money, a clear indication that Marcus's scheme was far more elaborate than simple corporate sabotage. He wasn't just trying to derail the Zenith project. He was trying to enrich himself, and possibly others, through illicit means, leveraging his position within Thorn Enterprises to benefit a rival company in which he held a secret stake. The sheer audacity of his plan and the breadth of his corruption was staggering. She recalled his desperate confession in the boardroom, stripped bare of his usual polish, his voice raw with regret and newfound love. She remembered his quiet persistence, his patience, his unwavering presence as he rebuilt the foundations of trust, not with grand gestures, but with consistent, humble action. He had indeed earned back a measure of her trust, not just as a colleague, but as a person. Evelyn felt a cold determination settle within her. This was not just a business challenge, it was a moral imperative. Her strong ethical compass, a defining trait that had guided her through her career, would not allow her to stand by while corruption festered. She recognized the familiar pattern of arrogance leading to self-destruction, a trait she had seen in many less formidable opponents. Marcus, in his conceit, had underestimated her precisely as she predicted. He had mistaken her quiet focus for ignorance, her measured response for inaction. It was his greatest mistake. She turned back to him, her dark eyes, usually so analytical, now reflecting a softer, warmer light. "Julian," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "The divorce papers, they represent a boundary I needed to set. A statement that I would not settle for less than true partnership, true recognition. But boundaries, once established, can become bridges." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place one late night. Evelyn discovered a series of encrypted communications between Marcus and a senior executive at a rival firm, detailing a complex scheme to leak proprietary information from the Zenith project in exchange for a substantial payout. The evidence was irrefutable, ironclad. She had her smoking gun. His breath hitched. He waited, barely daring to hope. She printed out the damning documents, her movements precise and deliberate. The weight of the evidence felt heavy in her hands, a testament to months of meticulous, silent investigation. She had moved through the corporate jungle like a ghost, gathering intelligence, building her case, while her opponent, arrogant and blinded by his own hubris, dug himself deeper into a pit of his own making. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for the corporate serpent to strike was now. But Evelyn would ensure it was his own strike, against himself. She felt a profound calm, the calm of a general poised on the eve of a decisive battle. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Thorn Enterprises to its core, and Evelyn Hayes, the underestimated strategist, was ready to deliver the final, devastating blow. "You said you would not contest the divorce, but you would continue to earn my trust, married or not. That showed me a genuine commitment to me, beyond the confines of a title. You committed to the person, Evelyn, not the wife." A faint, tender smile graced her lips. "That is the kind of partner I need, the kind of man I can truly see myself with." Evelyn Hayes held the printed documents in her hand, the thin paper feeling immensely heavy with the weight of exposed truth. The encrypted communications, the financial records, the intricate web of shell corporations. It was all there, damning evidence of Marcus Thorne's insidious betrayal. Her long hours of meticulous investigation, fueled by an unwavering commitment to integrity and a sharp, strategic mind, had finally yielded the irrefutable proof she needed. She felt no triumph, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. Justice, in her world, was a precise equation, and the variables had finally aligned. She reached out, her hand usually reserved, gently touching his arm. "You have begun to earn my trust, Julian. Not all of it, not yet, but enough to consider a new beginning. Not a return to the old, but a true fresh start." The sheer audacity of Marcus's scheme was breathtaking. He had not merely intended to derail the Zenith project to embarrass Evelyn and Julian. He had woven a complex tapestry of corruption, using his position within Thorne Enterprises to funnel sensitive proprietary information to a rival conglomerate, all while siphoning off millions through cleverly disguised offshore accounts. His ambition was boundless, his arrogance blinding, leading him to believe he was untouchable. Evelyn had consistently seen this pattern in lesser opponents. Pride invariably preceded a fall. Julian's eyes widened, a wave of profound relief washing over him. Evelyn, are you saying— She shared her findings with Clara, her loyal assistant, in the dead of night. Clara, usually composed, gasped as Evelyn laid out the evidence, piece by painstaking piece. This is incredible. Evelyn, how did you even uncover all of this? I am saying, she interrupted softly, that we do not need to finalize those papers. But we will not simply revert to the way things were. Our marriage, as it existed, is over. What we build now will be entirely new, entirely different. It will be built on the foundation you have painstakingly laid: honesty, mutual respect, genuine understanding, and the unwavering commitment to truly see each other every single day. Patterns, Clara, Evelyn replied, her voice calm, her eyes sharp. Anomalies in the data, discrepancies that others dismissed as minor, but which hinted at a deeper, more deliberate design. Marcus's arrogance made him sloppy. He believed his position, and Julian's distraction would shield him. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a gesture of profound tenderness they had rarely shared before. A new beginning, he whispered, the words filled with fervent hope. I promise you, Evelyn, I will cherish it. I will cherish you. And Julian? Clara asked, her voice softer. Does he know? The years that followed were a testament to Evelyn's resilience and Julian's unwavering commitment to his profound transformation. Their marriage was indeed reborn, not as a polite arrangement, but as a vibrant, dynamic partnership rooted in deep mutual respect and a love that had been forged in the crucible of loss and painful self-discovery. Not yet, Evelyn said. He's aware of the irregularities, but not the full extent of the sabotage, nor the architect behind it. This is my investigation, my responsibility. I needed to be certain before involving anyone else. Her gaze drifted toward the darkened city skyline, her expression unreadable. The personal entanglement with Julian complicated matters, but she would not allow it to compromise the professional integrity of her findings. This was about Thorne Enterprises, about fundamental principles, and about holding the corrupt accountable. Julian continued to champion Evelyn's career, not just within Thorne Enterprises, but across the industry. He became her most ardent supporter, her most trusted confidant, and her intellectual equal in a way he had never been before. He sought out opportunities for her, celebrated her every achievement, and always made it clear that her brilliance was a cornerstone of their shared life. He learned to anticipate her needs, not in a subservient way, but as a deeply attuned partner who understood the intricacies of her mind and spirit. Meanwhile, Julian found himself increasingly drawn into the orbit of the Zenith project, albeit indirectly. The persistent irregularities Evelyn had mentioned gnawed at him. He began to review the project reports with a finer-toothed comb, noticing the subtle delays, the unexpected material shortages, the logistical hiccups that seemed to accumulate at a statistically improbable rate. His architectural mind, accustomed to precision and order, recognized the subtle signs of deliberate disruption. Their relationship evolved into a profound synergy. They challenged each other, stimulated each other, and supported each other through every professional and personal endeavor. Julian's occasional bursts of arrogance were now met with Evelyn's quiet, firm guidance, which he humbly accepted. His appreciation for her quiet strength and profound integrity grew with each passing day. He found immense joy in the small, intimate moments, Evelyn's rare, unguarded laughter, the way her eyes would light up during a complex intellectual debate, the comfort of her quiet presence beside him. He had finally learned to truly see her, and in doing so, had found a depth of love he never knew existed. His conversations with Serena had become strained. Her surface-level charm, once so captivating, now felt increasingly superficial. She remained oblivious to the corporate turmoil Julian was grappling with, offering trite advice or attempting to steer the conversation back to their shared past. The contrast with Evelyn's intellectual depth and practical acumen became agonizingly clear. Julian found himself craving Evelyn's insight, her ability to dissect complex problems and offer a clear path forward. He missed their intellectual sparring, the quiet understanding that had once been the bedrock of their professional, if not personal, relationship. Evelyn, in turn, allowed herself to fully embrace the love that Julian now openly offered. The walls she had built around her heart, so carefully constructed for self-preservation, slowly crumbled. Replaced by a secure sense of being cherished and understood, she realized that true strength lay not in perpetual self-sufficiency, but in the courage to allow oneself to be vulnerable, to trust in a love that had proven its worth. She saw the unwavering sincerity in Julian's eyes, the profound changes in his character, and knew that this love, reborn from the ashes of past mistakes, was real and enduring. One afternoon, Julian, driven by a growing sense of unease about the Zenith project, decided to visit the project site unannounced. He wanted to see the ground-level operations, to feel the pulse of the enormous undertaking Evelyn was managing. He found Evelyn in the middle of a heated discussion with a team of engineers, her voice calm but firm, her posture radiating quiet authority. They often reflected on their journey, a path paved with misunderstanding, regret, and ultimately, redemption. The ghost of Serena, once a haunting presence, faded entirely, replaced by the vibrant reality of their profound connection. Julian sometimes thought of the kiss, that fateful, misguided moment, and recognized it not as a source of shame, but as the painful yet necessary catalyst that had shattered his illusions and forced him to confront the truth of his heart. It was the moment he thought he had ruined everything, when in fact, he had unknowingly set the stage for true love to finally bloom. The structural integrity reports for the new power conduits are inconsistent, Evelyn was saying, holding a tablet. There are discrepancies between the lab tests and the on-site materials. We need a full audit of the supply chain, immediately. And I want an independent forensic analysis of the recent material shipments. I suspect a compromise in the quality control process. The story of Evelyn and Julian became a quiet legend in their circles, not a tale of dramatic romance, but of profound transformation, of justice found, and of a love that was salvaged and redefined through the crucible of honesty and unwavering commitment. Evelyn Hayes continued to rise, a beacon of integrity and strategic brilliance, never again underestimated. And Julian Thorne, the man who had thought he knew everything, lived the rest of his life proving that true love was not about finding perfection, but about finally opening your eyes to the extraordinary person who was always there, waiting to be truly seen. Her words, delivered with quiet intensity, stunned Julian. He listened, hidden from her view, as she systematically dismantled the engineers' initial assurances, pointing out flaws in their data, questioning their assumptions with a precision that was breathtaking. She wasn't just managing a project, she was leading an investigation, her instincts guiding her towards a deeper, more troubling truth. He watched as the engineers, initially defensive, slowly began to nod, their faces reflecting a mixture of grudging respect and dawning alarm.